This is Waveshaper, and you're listening to the Paradise Arcade.
The Paradise Arcade contains graphic language. Listener discretion is advised. You are listening to the Paradise Arcade with Kyle and Eric, promoting synthwave, music, and culture.
Welcome to another episode of the Paradise Arcade. This week, we have a very special guest, Waveshaper. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, guys.
We're very excited to have you on. It's a big deal for us.
Yeah, when we started out, we were thinking about who are the names that we really want to get onto the show, and you are one of the first that were mentioned.
Oh, that's cool.
The upper echelon of synthwave. If you want to be called synthwave, it's a little bit divisive term.
Yeah, it is nowadays, but I'm fine with that. I think that's where we came from, and we're still going with that. Although people are exploring new things, but the foundation is synthwave. It's what it is.
Yeah, that's really, and being one of the originators, it's got to be an interesting thing for you to see, some from 2012-ish to now, almost being a full decade in, the evolution and what things look like and where things are going. Has there been anything interesting in your time in the space that you've observed?
Yeah, I think it has been a very fun journey to follow this progression over the years. Because I remember when I jumped in, like you said, around 2012, 2013 there, I met some other colleagues here in Sweden, Robert Parker, and there were some other people doing this, and we stick around for a while. And I remember we were always calling the evolution of synthwave for like different waves. So we said that we are wave 2, because before that we had like Mitch Murder, we had Miami Nights, and we had Lost Years and those. So we came in the wave 2. And then, with a lot of involvement in the popular culture area, like Stranger Things and other type of events, more people joined in. And then we thought, like, we must have reached the peak now. But obviously we hadn't that time. And it just kept going, And then what was the next one that really influenced the genre? Yeah, maybe the mainstream hit, like with The Weeknd bringing in the tracks Blinding Lights. Then we said, okay, now it has taken like new land, which is pretty cool. We were pretty pro that. Some people could be like, come on, we have done this for a long time, etc. But so it has been, for me, quite a surprise to see that it's still going. And it's a little bit fun when you said, if you want to be called synthwave or not, because I think quite many people has tried to distance a little bit, because it has been saturated in a way since so many artists are involved now. But I think, I will not like ditch the genre, because it's where we all came from. But obviously we need to do new things, and I think that is a part of synthwave.
Mm-hmm.
It's doesn't only need to be this cliche, palms and the DeLorean stuff, and the grids. That has been overused. I can tell that, of course. But so for me, it is very cool and fun to see that many artists are bringing in their, thing into the music, and that is quite unique, I would say, and that is still what really takes me to be a part of this, is because it's so playful. Playful. You can do whatever you want. I took some MS-DOS inspired stuff for some music. I haven't seen that many people following on that trend, but for me that was fun, if you know what I mean. For me that was very important, and that I had a room to do that with this genre, and it was appreciated. That is cool.
That is really cool. It's interesting. I try not to get involved too much in the forums and in those groups, because they can be a little tribalistic. But I do get the sense that if you want to do MS-DOS based synth or whatever it is, there's so much room to just be playful and to experiment and this new emerging subgenre, which is data wave, which is sort of like takes like bits of Comtrues and bits of chill synth, and it's so like Memorex Memories is part of that. A Demon would be part of it. It's really interesting.
Data
wave.
Okay.
And you know, one thing that I have been reflecting on this topic quite a lot is that the underground genre today has a far more reach than it had during like 10, 15 years ago, when we didn't have the digital media of streaming, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, today this kind of music can be quite established within you know, YouTubers, Twitchers, other streamers, or video gamers. That wouldn't have been possible for like 20 years ago. So I think that's very fun to see that the underground movement can have such a big fan base today, thanks to, I mean, it's an internet genre, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that is opening up quite a lot for us indie artists. I mean, we don't, because I remember when I started to make music, my goal were to be played on the radio.
Right. That was the only avenue.
It was, and I was pushing that so hard, because that was the only area that you could be like, have a spot for your music to be shown for others. But today, I mean, it's a completely different ballpark, and I think that is inspiring, I would say.
Yeah, that's was Myspace a big part of your early music journey?
Yes, it was.
Because when I was making music, that was the way that you connected to other artists, was MySpace. Yeah. You'd find the different things, and you'd hook up with your people, and you'd find people that helped distribute, because there wasn't playlists per se. Excuse me, sorry. There wasn't playlists or things like that. You'd find another person in another country, and they would help push your music, and you know, it went that route. So I liked MySpace for that reason. I know, like, that's dinosaur shit to say, but
it's very old, you know. And just thinking about this, I'm frightened to think of what my music taste would be like if the internet weren't a thing, if I didn't have access to find all this different music. It would be a very sad day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I remember also in the early days of music production, I think quite many of us bedroom producers or hobby musicians, we were also hanging out in different studio forums. So we were uploading music, and people gave feedback and things like that. And that was around 2006, I would say. I think, yeah, pretty long time ago now.
Yeah, no kidding. And how have you changed? You've been doing this for so long. Your music has had a progression. What's kept you inspired? What's held your imagination? Because you're still sort of in the genre, but you obviously have to grow as an artist. You're a different person than you were 10 years ago. So what's keeping you going?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think I've been doing quite various different genres in the past. Started out with making electronic music in the early 2000s with like trance and techno music, and then all of a sudden I found this, you know, genre, which was for me like the perfect thing, you know, because with all the retro elements of video games and 80s soundtrack, that kind of stuff. So it was quite natural for me to do this kind of music, and I was surprised that people even would listen to it, you know, because it was so nerdy. Oh, hey, look at this! I made a remix of Scarface theme. Okay, that you like that one. But as for progression, I think the latest years, I've always striving to like evolve my mix, evolve my sound. I'm not afraid to bring in new elements. It is still interesting for me, because I do it like a challenge for myself, that every new release needs to bring in something new. I've been asked quite a lot of times, why don't you do a Station Nova 2? And I said, I simply can't do that, because I did that one, and that was the purpose of that album, you know. So and I think it is important for me to stay motivated. And that's maybe why I brought in the like MS-DOS Wave 66 and 100 megahertz track, because they were fun for me.
Yeah.
And then I was like, great that other people enjoy it as well, you know. Um, and as it is today, when I'm sitting here now in 2022, still doing this kind of music, I'm not thinking like it needs to be a pure synthwave track. I'm trying to bring in other elements that I find to be fun and creative, I would say.
Yeah, I think like with the newest release, it's funky. It's got a funky, um, Daft Punky sort of vibe to it, which I love, and to see that progression from where you started to where you are now, it it seems like you're having more fun. Is that true? Are you still like, because the music comes across as being energetic and fun and funky?
Yeah. I think when if I go back, I think when I started, I was like, how should I say, very sci-fi oriented, space influenced for many of my early compositions. So yeah, and it's also fun when you mention Daft Punk. I always have a quite big respect to those guys. Sad to see them leave last year, but that is that is important because they started out the same. I would say they were experimenting with a lot of things that was completely new in the mid 90s. So yeah, how should I say? I mean, they were young then. They were nerds. They were
Mm-hmm.
interested in synths. So yeah, it's a perfect match.
Mm-hmm.
It's very surprising to me that they got play that early on MTV like they did because
Yeah.
it was so different.
Yeah. It is. It's quite cool because if you look up on the internet, in the days where they didn't have the helmets,
Mm-hmm.
it is pretty cool to see those parties that they were playing at. They were like basement stuff in Paris, and they were having like a Roland Juno 106 and a Lindrum drum machine, and did all kinds of experimenting stuff. So I mean, they were, how should I say, at that time it was very playful for them, and I maybe that was the reason why they stopped, because they felt like with the random access memory they have also progressed. If you listen to their discography, they have the Human After All album, which is pretty cool with a lot of synths, low bit stuff, and then with the random access memories. I think that was the end for them because they did like this studio album with guitars and a lot of elements. So yeah, and then I'm looking at myself and seeing, am I also going that direction? It's a bit weird, but yeah. To tidy up again to what you asked in the beginning, for me it's all about if I have fun, I hope that the listeners will enjoy it because I think they will if I try to elaborate with some new stuff. I'm recently being into this like yeah yeah the listeners can't see it here, but this I'm trying to, how should I say, for each release I'm trying to limit myself for some certain gear
Mm.
or software synthesize or something. So for example, the things I did in the past, I'm not even considering to use that VST or synth anymore because that was like connected to a certain album. So I'm bringing in some new synths, some new gears, always help to boost motivation as well.
Okay, that's kind of related to a question that I was going to ask you. Is I think that you may be the king of hardware. I think you might have more hardware than anyone else. And I was
Yeah, and
going to ask, with keeping things fresh, if, each time you got a new piece of gear, if you wanted to incorporate that in or how you did that. So that kind of answered that question for me. I like that. But you do have
yeah.
a lot of stuff, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I have too much stuff, maybe, but there is actually an explanation for it because it's not an excuse for having a lot of synths because I like them. But when yeah, this might sound a bit weird now, but I remember, when I grew up as a teenager, I was very nerdy in terms of analog synths, and what I was like 17, 16 years old, because I started to explore the music in the computer, and then I saw these software synths and realized, okay, this is emulations from some hardware stuff. So while my aged friends, they bought like fancy cars and motorcycles, and I bought an old ARP 2600 from the 1970s, imported from the US. And that was weird for me, but I had a passion for that at that time, and since that, it has kept with me for like 20 years. So it has taken a lot of time to like build up this weird arsenal of hardware synthesizers, and then at a time, maybe it was 3 years ago, I said to myself, why do I even need this one now? Because you can do the same sounds in the computer. You can. I mean, the difference today between a hardware synth and a software synth, they are so small. But there are some synths that has some unique attributes. For example, my Roland Jupiter 4 here, I simply can't get that sound from something else, and it's the hands-on thing that really creates this motivational, inspiring thing, I would say, and that you can sometimes lose when you sit in front of a screen all the time. So I think 3 years or so, I realized that I really need to have these hardware synths in order to get the idea starting, because sometimes it is very creative for me to just fiddle around with these ones, even with the computer shut off. Because I've been doing music for so many years now, and opening like Cubase or another DAW music system can be a little bit uninspiring, because you only see, okay, it's a blank project, here we go, where do we start? I don't know.
Right.
But having help from my friends, that helps, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's so. Do you sit down and do you just try to find a tone or a sound that hits you, and then you build off of that, or do you start with a melody or a bass line, or just it just depends on whatever it is?
Yeah, I think it depends. Usually, sometimes you start with a melody, sometimes it is with a beat and a sound. I think for me, I think I'm pretty much nerdy into like sound design. That was probably also one of the reasons why I started with synthesizers at a quite young age, because I was fascinated by a lot of sound designs in video, in movies. I mean, I remember. One obvious thing is the ARP 2600. It was used quite a lot in Star Wars, and it was used in Riders of the Lost Ark. There was a strange humming sound from that arc that was made by that synthesizer. So I was really like, okay, this is cool. You can do both sound design and fancy electronic music. Because at that time, I also knew that Chemical Brothers had the same synthesizers to do quite a lot of weird techno shit with it. So it connected to me in many different aspects, if you understand what I mean.
Definitely.
So who were big for you growing up as far as musical inspiration? It sounds like you've been into electronic music for a long time. You're talking Chemical Brothers, and we're talking Daft Punk, and those guys have been around forever. Who are big influences for you?
Yeah. If we go way back, I remember doing some crate digging at my dad's vinyls, and then I found Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen. It was frightening as a kid to see that, skull coming out of the earth, So, just looking at that artwork, I understood this is some interesting, different stuff. So I asked my dad to play it. And, obviously he was into this kind of 70s synth music. And I can't remember which age I was in, maybe 8, 9 years old, maybe. And that really was probably the first time that I can remember really that I was drawn into this kind of music. And then later on, I found more of his music and Kraftwerk and that kind of stuff. And growing up in the 90s, which I did, born in the 80s, I was drawn a lot to video game music and like Commodore 64 stuff, because I'm always been very much into instrumental music. I never really paid attention for lyrics, because all my friends said, have you heard this new song by blah, blah, blah? And I was like, Yeah, I have, but I never really pay attention at all to what they sang about, you know. As I was listening to the sound design really, and I mean later on after being in the teenage years, I was, as you said, drawn into that time was the late 90s. And that was Daft Punk and Prodigy, Chemical Brothers, because I think in my high school years in this uh, um, area in Sweden, a lot of people were playing in bands. And you know, in the 90s, it was the like punk and grunge kind of stuff that we were about to get out from, I would say. So I was drawn into like the Prodigy and Chemical Brothers and Daft Punk. And later on, you know, going forward, I explored more French stuff. The Justice came along, and then eventually I found Kavinsky in probably 2007. I think he had a quite early EP called Teddy Boy or so. It wasn't really synthwave; it was like French house stuff. So that's probably my journey. Growing up on 70s synths, then video game music, Daft Punk, Chemical Brothers, Prodigy stuff, and then finding out the French acts of French house, which eventually led me into this genre. Very short summary, but that's the journey.
I would say mine is pretty similar. So
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
We're
that's good.
alike.
In what
But
ways? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no. I was just. I think for me still, you know, this kind of video game music, like from the Commodore 64, I can still play those tunes even today because they were limited to 3 tracks, and at that time, the production were like a programming skill. I mean, to do that kind of things that many of the composers did back then was like genius moves, I would say. And to create those kind of harmonies, melodies with a limited, limited number of tracks and hardware. That was for me amazing. So I still even today listen to a lot of that music because it was very inspiring.
And I would
Yeah,
say
sorry. Yeah,
it's rubbed off on your own because your own way of making music because you're sounds like you're limiting yourself
yeah,
going into
mm,
making new music to
mm,
inspire yourself or to force yourself
yeah,
to think in different ways.
yeah,
So it's an interesting through line that you appreciate Commodore 64's limit, but the brilliance of what they're able to do, and then you're doing very similar things.
mm.
What other things in video game music were you into, like the Japanese titles? Were you like what drew you into the video game music, and how's that influenced
I
you?
mean, I think that different kind of systems had their, you know, spotlights. If I look at the NES, for example, it is the soundtrack of Castlevania, the Konami, and I mean Mega Man soundtracks, amazing. I mean Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3 for me, yeah, that is a really a highlight with the melodies, especially the melodies. I think that what's really bloom out in those soundtracks. Exceptional, amazing melodies. And I've been telling to myself I when I'm evolving with my music, I'm trying to say, okay, maybe this time I shouldn't do as many melodies, but I can't really because that's really my thing, you know, to work with melodies and the harmonies from those. So yeah, I think there is a reason why I keep doing that, you know, with the legacy that I just had with those video games. Yeah,
Mega Man 2.
That's it.
It's amazing. Everyone loves it. I have yet to find one person say that that isn't an amazing soundtrack.
yeah, it's really perfect. And I mean, still, if I go back, I mean, the Commodore 64 it was really cool, you know, with Outrun soundtrack. It came from the Sega arcades, of course, but it was ported into the C64, and that was the first I heard, the soundtrack from Outrun, which was really cool. And I mean, but still, I mean, I can still remember quite a lot of video game music from like the PlayStation 1. I mean, Metal Gear Solid had a very cool soundtrack in that sense, from which I believe was Harry Gregson Williams, who also have done quite a lot of film music. And yeah, I mean, I could talk video game music for a long time if you want. But I think that's and then for me, I was one highlight of my career was when I was asked to do video game music, because that really connected the strings, you know. Because I was at that time I was really feeling like, oh shit, is this really happening? I am about to do some video game music now. Oh my god. And you know, sometimes when I look back on that now, I can feel like, yeah, that was it, you know. It connected the strings. I have done really what I need now with my music, if I say so. You know?
It came full circle.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Mm.
It sounds like, you know, you hit on a lifelong like dream to make video game music. I can't imagine like how awesome that must have felt. It's like, is this real? Is
Yeah.
it really happening? Am I really here?
Yeah, it is actually a very fun process, because in this project that I did with Fury, they also wanted the music to change depending on what the character did. You know, in a fight scene or some other just a walking scene, the music should evolve to what the player did. I mean, so that is even if you work with music for a movie, that is much more simple, because I mean you adapt the music to the recorded footage, you know. But making music that should gradually adapt to what the player is doing, yeah, that was a challenge, but also very, very fun.
How long did it take you to do that project?
I think it was some iterations back and forward with the developers, but we kind of matched quite quickly, because I mean, obviously they found my music and asked if I wanted to contribute to their game. So I think I've wrapped up that in a couple of months, I think. Yeah.
Oh wow! So that you're quite prodigious, just getting right through it then.
Yeah, I mean, if you hit the motivational vein, I think you must, you know, hold on to that. So it could be, for my production really look like that. I can say to, you know, my family, "Hey, Daddy needs to be in the studio now for some day." You know? Because if you really find that motivation, my main message is to, I mean, take it.
Yeah.
You know, why you have it, and I think that is going with all kind of art, I would think, you know. And yeah, so that's important for me.
Have you noticed a change in your inspiration and frequencies as you've gotten older? You know, from say 2012 to 2022, how's your
Yeah.
music
Mm.
process changed?
Yeah. I'm more hard to myself, I think, when it comes to quality. I think in the early days of music production, I just like released music, and I don't know if you guys remember that time, but that was the golden age of SoundCloud, I would say. So in a sense, we released like music every week that time, and there were quite a lot of blogs, you know, featuring the music, etc. So if I look back that time, I'm not able to release that much music that frequent anymore. I'm more, you know, picky to myself about sound design or track arrangement or whatever it might be. So that has really changed a lot, you know. I'm not saying that I have writer's block, but for me, for example, when I did Mainframe, the latest album, which only is 8 tracks, because I felt this is enough, you know. I have the concept now for this album. I think some people are expecting more tracks out of an album, but for me, it was like, okay, it's done. I'm not able to deliver more on this concept, you know. And but I think it's also good in a sense, you know, to be a little bit more picky to yourself, because the quality will also be better in the tracks then.
Go ahead.
Definitely quality over quantity.
Indeed.
Mm.
I think that's
But
definitely something you get as you get older too.
Yeah, but there is actually a trend right now. I mean, with playlisting and the golden age of streaming, there is a trend, as you probably already know, to like release more singles than albums. People are seeing like singles as an opportunity to get featured on playlist and get more plays on a certain track rather than on a concept album. I don't know if you have any preference of this or if you have observed this at all.
We are both vinyl fans,
Yeah.
so we like to
Yeah,
take everything in album form. And I was going to say that an album
yeah.
with 8 tracks, while some
Mm,
people may think that's not enough, that's just about right for a
mm,
vinyl release. 4 tracks each side,
Yep.
about 20
mm.
minutes of music each side.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I don't stream much,
Yeah. Mm.
so I definitely would prefer album releases, at least
Mm-hmm.
on my end.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think there is a trend. I mean, with I don't know if you are into the streaming business. I would say business because that is where the majority of the money is created nowadays. Of course, I'm also a vinyl guy. By the way, I started to collect vinyls of like obscure 80s soundtracks early in my years. But I would say that people are trying to get out of one track more. If you have noticed in this in like mainstream artists, they have maybe an extended version of a track, maybe a deluxe edition, maybe a remix. So that's a trend that is currently happening because to get more streams on the produced work, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely I know what you're talking about. It's because a lot of friends that are producers, there's this stress, especially if they're not maybe well established. It's how do you
Mm,
get your music out there? How do you get someone's attention? Do you get on Dr. Disrespect stream or this
yeah,
playlist or whatever it is? And it's trying to like always churn out the next thing, and so there's no real coherent releases anymore. It's just a single. Here's a single. Here's a song. As you say, an extended
mm,
play, a remix. That's a big thing now.
mm,
And maybe it's just because of our age or whatever it is, but a
yeah,
full album with a thought out concept with movement. Because I've always been more non-vocal, so I want my
mm,
music to take me through movements,
yeah.
and you do that really well with an album. You can't really do that with a single.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I'm pro that as well. And for me, when it comes to album creation, it is a lot about storytelling. I pay quite a lot of thinking about the track arrangement. How to bring in the listener to this concept. With a strong first track and then maybe an energetic second one, calm it down a little bit, and then maybe an ambient take. That is important for me, and I think that is maybe also because I think it is fun to create like an audio experience that is able to create a visual experience for the listener. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So yeah, so I'm definitely pro that kind of storytelling thing. It is just my observation that the music industry on the mainstream side then really is pushing for quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a bit sad because, as you also said, quite stressful for new acts to be like get recognition. And I think for me, because this is just an observation from my side, because if I see newer acts jumping into whatever new music genre, I don't think they have that much patience if they don't have this music from their heart,
Mm-hmm.
because I think I've been there myself, seeing some trends in music and feeling like, okay, I need to try out this dubstep stuff. And I sucked at it really because I didn't have time to do all the wobble bases and all the fine detail things. But at that time, I was feeling like, okay, how do I get into this? But then you need to reflect and really think. This might sound like a cliche thing, but what's really from your heart? What kind of music means a lot to you? And then again, it is a quite funny thing that this music movement actually happened. I still can't believe it sometimes. Me doing like Terminator 1 versions in 2002, put them in a folder, and it's just for me. And then all of a sudden, people want to listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's I can get chills, when I talk about it like that. It's crazy.
In some ways, it seems like an anti-movement, an anti-pop culture movement, because there is that space to breathe, that space to explore different thoughts. Because I think, in my opinion, synthwave tends to be a more maybe emotional, nostalgic type of music. You could be datacore or space wave or whatever, but it evokes things for you. Whereas I think like modern pop music is just okay, dance, 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 whatever, and then move on. It's really fleeting. It's a fleeting high. Where I think this type of music is a lot more introspective. It makes you feel more. It makes you take space out of the busyness a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly to zone out a little bit, I would say, because for me that has also been a quite big thing with music production. It is an area for me to just, relax, because music production for me has always been like a relaxing thing, really. Not really putting myself on a pressure. It's just to create this imaginary soundtrack for myself. That can be very joyful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I like it for that, and it's perfect for driving or sitting down in your living room, listening and really just engaging with music. And I like that in some ways, and I think this has to do with like our love of vinyl, is you have to engage with it. You engage with the music. You take the disc out of the sleeve. You look at the artwork. You sit down. You listen to it. You've got to flip the side. You interact with the music a lot more, and I think that tactile sense with everything.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just about to say, I mean, that is a relaxing thing itself, to just flip the sides and maybe have a beer or whatever and just listen to it. Maybe after a stressful work day or whatever. I really enjoy that.
This is a conversation I have with my girlfriend, where she does not understand why I love synthwave so much. And like, the world is so busy and has so much stress. Like, this is a thing that really de-stresses me. It really calms me down a lot.
Well, now you've got an extra factor. You can know that when Tom makes music, he's relaxing while making it, and you can relax while enjoying it.
That's kind of meta, yeah.
Although for me, making music when I tried to do that really stressed me out. That was not a relaxing process at all.
Well,
and I don't do it anymore.
Yeah, practice makes perfect.
But I mean, the one thing that I have been reflecting on this kind of music is really, because as you said, it's a nostalgic thing, bringing in elements from the past that meant something to you in your childhood, But the later year I have reflected, because if you are in a nostalgic genre for like 7-8 years, you also grow older from the time that you were exploring these kind of things when you were a kid. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So this is also a reflection from my side, not trying to be too poetic here, but it is also a balance with nostalgia, because you also need to look into the future.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really grab on too hard into this, because it might disrupt you a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because you are feeling so much for this old stuff that never will come back. I mean, it sounds very harsh to say so. It means a lot to you. It lays very close to your heart, but it will not come back. So if you're exploring with that kind of emotions too long, the risk is that you might get a little bit depressed. So I was like, at some time, feeling I need also to look into the future, like with kind of my music, bringing in like new stuff that hasn't anything to do with this, nostalgic thing. Because I see some people are sticking into nostalgia a little bit too hard,
Yeah.
Just a personal observation from my side. I think there is a fine balance to overdo it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I find that if you cling too hard to nostalgia, and this goes for anything. Look at Star Wars people. If you like, there's a certain sect of people that are like, if it's not the original 3, it's all heresy, right? And they get quite defensive and quite upset when new ideas or explorations of themes, the progression into the future, intrudes into that nostalgia, they're just impervious to it. They won't do it. And I think there's a bit of that in our scene where there's some folks that are rigid in what things should be and sound like and how song structure should be. And then there's no room for experimentation or growth or new things within that.
Going along with that, though, with the nostalgia thing, and as you mentioned, Tom, people getting older, I have seen more 90s inspired stuff come out of it. So maybe the older you get, you think back, well, hey, this point in time in the 90s with these things was also very good. It doesn't have to always be about the 80s. So then you get that aspect as well.
Yeah, very valid point, I would say, because it needs to move with your age in some way. And I think it is healthy to bring in other elements, what it might be. But I mean, nostalgia is still a very important part for this genre. So I'm not saying that you should not bring it in. You should, but you should be a little bit careful of overdoing it. I think it's the same with popular culture in movies or series. I think we have Stranger Things, which obviously were quite early, and that was a big hit. And then you had some American Horror Story doing 80s things, and I was like, yeah, okay, they are doing that now. And then if more and more people will do it, it will be a little bit fed up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny when you talked about Star Wars, because I'm also I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm pro Mandalorian or Rogue One, or if it's a Book of Boba Fett. I mean, they're okay. But it is one thing that I really reflected on. That was the Force Awakens. When that come to the cinema, they really pushed a lot on the nostalgic moments, because there is the Millennium Falcon, there is R2D2, there is C3PO, you know. But I got it at that time. But if they would have constantly trying to do that too much, it is a little bit, you know. Yes, I know that C3PO. Yes, he's gold. Okay, yeah. So what's next?
Right. And you know that that first one, it was essentially just a replay of the first Star Wars movie, beat for beat. It was all the same thing from A New Hope. So they're telling the same story, just with new packaging. So people loved it, but I was left like, I liked watching it initially because I'm like, oh my god, the rush of like this thing from childhood. And then when I actually sat and thought about it, I'm like, I really don't actually like this movie that much, because it's not new. It's not pushing the story in any interesting way. It's just retelling the same beats from another story.
Yeah, that was clearly, I mean, seen in the last one of this, you know, the new trilogy. You know, it was very much like Return of the Jedi. I should not spoil it here, but you also had Emperor Palpatine there again. You know, it's incredible. I mean, it's the same actor actually playing him. It's quite hilarious, you know. So I get your point, absolutely.
We're like, I could always watch those movies, the original ones, if I want to watch them. So do something. I think nostalgia, and I was thinking about this as you were talking, Tom. I think you're talking about the balance of not holding too tight onto nostalgia. I think the correct balance is relying on yourself, what means things to you, what inspires you, what drives you as an individual, and being honest about that as your own person, and not about what other people want. You know, I think there's a difference of like, I'm inspired by this thing, and here's my interpretation or art from it, as opposed to, well, I know the audience is going to like this beat, that, this other thing, and then you create this generic nostalgia thing. And I think, because there's like Denis Villeneuve with Blade Runner 2049, I would argue that the new Blade Runner might be better than the original. And he does a perfect... I think he does a really good job of balancing his own love of the original with his own interpretation of what that means
for the people.
Yeah, in modern time, that was one of the few movies that actually kept up with the original. I was a bit afraid when I was about to see that movie, but as you said, it really it was a perfect balance and homage to the original, but bringing in new elements. And maybe that is what we are doing with our music as well. It's a homage and bringing in new elements that keeps it fresh and interesting.
Exactly.
Synthwave, the Blade Runner 2049 edition.
Yeah, exactly.
Except, the production techniques of the 80s music is by far superior with what they were doing in the studio. I was just reading an article about Peter Gabriel and about how when he released he basically created the gated drums that were used in like Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight, and then went on to be influential in a lot of music. Like, they were experimenting and doing a lot of weird stuff, and Peter Gabriel was sort of like laughed at because he's bringing in these other elements, but he was so strict, like he's going to experiment, he's going to bring in the stuff that he wants to bring in, and now it's basically just influenced an entire generation of people. Even though at the time it was a complete risk.
Yeah, and that was a bold move, actually. I think it's really interesting, as you said, how that specific gated snare thing could be so big part of like today's popular music.
And at the time, like, what the fuck is this?
That's and you could find quite many obscure old YouTube clips of studio productions from like electronic music at that time, and it's like you said. I mean, those stuff, they were new, and it's quite amazing how people back then with synthesizer, which intention was to emulate like real instruments. I mean, the perfect thing is really the TB303, this bass line synthesizer by Roland. It was, the intention was to emulate like an electronic bass guitar, and it started out like that, but no one really paid attention to what it sounded like, because it didn't sound like electric bass at all. But then, it got like the biggest synths in this like acid movement at all, and techno music. So that's kind of fun, how something that was created for some specific thing ended up to be a completely different thing.
Yeah. So I have a question. What's next for you? What things are left for you to accomplish as Waveshaper, or is there anything that's kind of left out there? I mean, doing a video game soundtrack, dream come true, being able to do what you want to do. Is there anything left?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy to write scores as well for movies. I have done a few, but it's definitely something that I would like to do more of. And I mean, also speaking of video game music, I'm actually at right now working with 2 different video games. So I think that is quite nice to see that. I mean, I have not really pushed them, but they have found my music and asked if I want to contribute on their games. So that has been it's still a big part for me, and I'm really happy to do that. Looking about, because for me, I'm also been working quite a lot with crazy merchandise. I have done some action figures, some different kind of floppy disk and things like that, because they were fun for me to do. And I mean, if you look at this year and going forward, I will do more collaborations actually with other artists, because that is also a creative booster for me, to hear what other people will read out from your music and add their kind of signatures to the track. That is really a creative process, I would say. So more collaborations. And then I'm also doing, not really sure if it is going to towards EPs or albums. I released an album last year, so I feel like next time it is probably towards an EP, and try to like mix that a little bit, because albums takes, as I said, quite a long time to finalize. Then lastly, I am also sitting on a lot of unreleased tracks, and I've actually been exploring my music back to 1999, finding some tracks that I feel like, okay, this could be something that listeners could enjoy to hear. So I will actually release an album. I don't know, I'm not sure if it will be this year or next year. It will be called Forgotten Shapes. I released an B-side album before that was called Lost Shapes, but now I'm even finding these forgotten shapes of music that I've been doing over the years that hasn't, seen the spotlight yet. So, and saying that as well, I'm also not just taking the track as they are, because I'm not saying low production quality, but some had. So I'm revisiting the old tracks and adding new elements to them. And that is also fun for me, going back to a 15-year-old track and to see, okay, this had some potential, but why did I put it on the trash bin, So trying to refine them, that is also a fun thing for me.
You're collaborating with yourself.
That's weird. Yeah. Hello, Tom from 1999. How are you doing? I don't know. Yeah, it's weird.
Can you talk a bit about collaborating with others? I mean, that's got to be an interesting place to get into someone else's head and play around with them, and then vice versa.
Yeah.
Like you send someone a track and they do something, and then it goes back and forth until whenever it's done. But that's got to be a really interesting process.
Yeah, it is. It is. How should I say? Very exciting to hear what the other producer has come up with. It could be like I start with some idea and send it over, or it could be that you have a track that is almost finished and you want some help and contribution. And as you said, I think because it can be a little bit of a one-man show in this industry. I mean, we are all these, individual people sitting behind our computers. So I value a lot about social interaction with others. And I think that you being by yourself in this kind of music for a long time, I mean, you will need to get some input from others to not become like a cabin fever in this music genre. So that is a fun process, and I think I get quite many requests to do collaborations from other producers, and sometimes I feel a little bit down to to say no, but I simply can't take in too much work, But recently, I don't know if you heard my remix. It's a new producer named Canopy Lee. I mean, this guy just contacted me on SoundCloud and say, "Hey, I liked your track, A Sense of Something from Mainframe." So I made my own version out of it. I was like, I usually get this kind of emails from then on now, but this one really stood out, and I was like, "Have you done electronic music before?" "No, I'm just starting." So I was really blown away, and I said, "Okay, let's do an official remix here." And he was super happy because he was no name at all. So from a promotional aspect, it was really, really good for him. But he didn't really value that. He really thought that it was fun, that I appreciated the music he has done. So that was also a social human connection.
Yeah.
I can help him, and he did something for me that I didn't think was possible with that track, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So,
how should I summarize this? I mean, it is important to understand that you can't really be a one-man show. It is very important to get interaction from other people.
I could see where if you were too much in your own world, it could get a little stale.
Yeah.
Would you consider doing like an entire album with another person?
Yeah, I think if you have the connection to someone, and that you are like thinking the same paths, and I think that could actually be a help to get even more creativity and motivation out of something. I think that the challenge will probably be, I mean, to commit to deadlines from both sides. There are other things in life that can come up and things like that. So that is probably one reason why people have chosen to do, producing on their own, because they don't need to rely on others to deadlines, etc. But I think doing an album with someone that you really click with would be very fun to do. Yeah.
So you have a live show coming up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And I'm wondering, how do you decide what gear to bring to a live show?
This one is simple because this is in Stockholm, Sweden. So for that show, I can bring quite a lot of stuff, and usually we do that when I play in Sweden. It is easier to bring like fun gears because you don't need to fly with them. Every time where there is an airplane involved, then you are a little bit, do I really dare to bring out this vintage stuff? But I mean, so for me, that really opened up another box for live interaction, really. So I'm really looking forward to this gig now in Stockholm, 1st of April, playing there, supporting Fool. I'm not sure if you have been listening to his music.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's really, I mean, he has done quite a lot of electronic music in the past, and he has been around for quite a long time, and then he jumped into the like synthwave genre some years ago, but still keeping on with his thing. And I've seen he's growing a lot, with his music. Also being supported by a quite big record label, so it's really fun to see that it goes so good for him, Rasmus. Yeah.
How is the atmosphere there in Sweden with COVID? Are you worried about that at all with the show?
I think the restrictions here. I mean, we were quite in the beginning of COVID. We didn't close down. But then a year later in the COVID pandemic, we started to introduce the same restrictions like in the rest of the world. So of course that limited the live shows a lot. So I haven't played live at all since the COVID pandemic started. But now there is, there is of course restriction. You have the vaccine pass, and you also have a limited number of people in the clubs. But looking at the situation right now with the Omicron and the constant fast spread, but not that many severe cases, it would be interesting to see which way the government is taking this. Some of our neighbor countries have decided to open up completely now. So I really hope that this is like the end of the tunnel, that it gets milder and milder for every variant. But I'm not a pandemic expert, but I can just hope that we will get rid of this shit soon and be able to play without any restrictions. But it is too early to say for me, of course, but let's hope.
Is there a desire for, because you're a family man, is there a desire for you to do more tour, like minus what's going on in the world? Do you want to tour? Do you like playing live shows?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this because during my years in this scene, I have done quite a lot of live shows, both in Europe and in the US and even Russia. One thing that I really enjoy, I maybe not be the stage man. I mean, I do this music mainly, as you know, for myself, and it's an internet-based genre. But for me, one highlight of playing live is to meet the people that actually listen to your music, to meet people like yourself that has a similar background in video gaming and growing up, coming back to nostalgia again here, but that really connects. I remember when I played in the US, we played at a hotel in Rhode Island at this neon festival. And I met so many great people there, who, and I'm a simple man. I'm not coming there like, oh, here, come on, so I'm not really bragging at all about that. So I really want to speak with as many people I can when I am out playing, because we can be, we can have different, how should I say, different scenarios and status in life. I remember when I played in Budapest, I met quite a guy who he was probably, he hadn't the best life at all, I would say, quite harsh, but we connected with the music, and that then it doesn't really matter what social status you had. I mean, the music connected, and we had a good chat, and he was very happy to share that with me, and I felt from my side that meant a lot to me to talk with that guy, and we only talked about the music, nothing else, and no, I mean, it was just the music. So that is one thing that is really important for me, because internet-based genre, sitting in front of the computer all day making music, social media, comments, but meeting people in real life, a key, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
That also gives you, a motivational thing of why you are doing this, because I've sometimes met people who say that my music saved their life, and I was like, no, come on, it didn't. But then they're like, yeah, really, I was in severe depression or whatever it might be, and then I really understood. Okay, so my mood, it's helping, yeah, getting a little bit sentimental here, but that's important things for me playing live, I would say. And coming back to your question about if I'm considering to play live more, I would say it's a balance between, as you know, family life and really what you get out of it. But I can reveal that I am discussing live music with quite many agencies that want me to play live more. Also, especially considering the US. So that will most probably happen. We just need to get this COVID situation out of the map. And then I really want to do a US tour, I think, because since when I played over at your country the last time, that was 2018, and it was not that many shows, but it gave me a very cool insight about many of the cities that I visited, and that was also very fun.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely be looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like this to happen.
Yeah, I think it will happen, but the question is just when, and then there is, we have also been discussing, some colleagues here in Sweden, what will the live scene actually be now when it has been, stalled for this long? Will they longing after coming back to listening to live music again, or will they be more restrictive and be more at home? I don't know. It's hard to say. But my personal view is that people really miss the atmosphere of live music and want to see that, for real.
I can say that when we opened back up and did some live shows here, the energy enthusiasm was pretty great. After being locked down for a couple of years, people were ready to get back out and go to shows.
Yeah, I think there will be a boost. It has been a little bit of a struggle, the last years, when you have seen that they need to postpone it again. Maybe some of the crew or band has got an infection and they need to cancel. So it would be good if all that kind of stuff can just end.
Right.
And we can rely on having it like it was in the past. But we will probably get there eventually.
That's awesome.
But I mean, for me, I think it also gets you a kick of because, as I said, I'm not the stage man. I said, but when I am at the stage, I have no problem to get into it, because then the energy and vibe is so nice. Especially I've been playing in Paris. I think the last 6 years I played there 5 years, and the nightclub scene in Paris is really cool. They play very late, but they are very energetic. And I played there with the last time I played there was with Comtruse, actually, and we had a really great time also, and meeting him, because I also remember when I stepped into this music, I listened a lot to his music, so that was also like connecting the circles a bit to be able to play with him.
And Seth is a really nice guy. He's really great
absolutely.
with his time.
Very much down to earth kind of guy, very relaxed and chill guy to hang out with, and that was a good time. We stayed at the same hotel in Paris as well, so we had breakfast day after, and that was like a crazy thing for me, because I listened to his music before I started to this project. So yeah, fun.
Yeah, that's going to be crazy. Like the full circle thing. I find myself in that situation a lot, where being on the show or the previous show that we had, we talk about these certain people, and then we loop around to meeting them and hanging out with them and getting to know them, and these weird circles of connection. It's been a crazy journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get to start out listening to your music, and now I get to sit here and talk to you. Full circle.
Yeah,
All right.
full circle. Full circle, yeah.
Kyle, do you have anything for Tom while we are here?
Yeah, I would like to change directions and go back to hardware again.
Yeah.
So, since you have so much stuff and a lot of it's old, do you do your own maintenance and repair on your gear? Do you find you have to do that a lot, or is your stuff in really good condition?
I'm praying every night that things will not broke. But I mean, they do. I mean, some of my synths are 50 years old, so I have connection with some local people here in Sweden that are really good at synth repairs. So if something goes bad, I know who to turn myself to get the things resolved. And I think it can be a bit expensive, but since you have, it's they. You have invested in it and they mean a lot to you, and they will not reduce in the value over the time, so it is important to make sure that they are in a proper condition. Yeah,
That's good. You've got a museum of stuff there.
yeah,
That you
yeah,
use.
yeah. But I think for me, when it comes to hardware, I think today it's actually fun because there has been a new evolvement of hardware when it comes to analog synths. There's quite many manufacturers today that are revisiting the old synthesizers, and making a new issue of them. For example, you have the Prophet 5, which is a legendary polyphonic synth, which has now a revision 4. The previous one was a revision 3 from like the mid 80s. So it's kind of cool to see that there is a market for this today, even with software. And a little bit surprising for me, because I thought that hardware synths would like get less popular with more good software synths. But I think it might be like the iteration and the hands-on thing that actually helps the situation a bit more these days.
Yeah, the
But
tactile
yeah,
interaction for sure.
sorry.
Oh, the tactile, like actually touching something, I think has
Yeah,
a lot of ways to unleash creative things.
yeah. And I mean, the same goes a little bit, since you said that you were vinyl fans. I think in the age of digital streaming, for me, when I buy vinyls, I obviously it's a nice quality when it comes to like the audio high fidelity thing. But for me, it's also about the package. Maybe there has a nice sleeve, maybe there is a poster inlay, maybe there is something else. So it gives something more to the listener than just playing something on Spotify or other streaming service.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree.
And going off of that, Velocity is one of my favorite total package releases
Ah,
on vinyl.
yeah, cool. I'm glad you like that. Yeah, the inner artwork there was made by Swedish friend here who does some of my artworks. His name is Autumn, and I really like that. The inner part of that vinyl. Yeah, and that's also one thing that I pay a lot of attention to when it comes to packaging my music. It needs to have a good art to it. I mean, today I think it's quite important, or it was important, to be able to stick out a little bit from the rest, to have a nice first impression of your music. I mean, your music might be perfect and nice and well balanced and nicely mixed and all that, but for me it has always been important to connect it to some artwork that means a lot to myself. Yeah. I can spin off to that just for a couple of minutes here. When I did the track, yes, CRT Days, that was heavily inspired by my childhood room, by me, playing like early PC games like SimCity 2000 or Myst or what it might be. And then I met this illustrator who, his name is John Lee, Keebs, Keebs, it's called. And he really illustrated that artwork perfectly. capturing that, feel and essence of me sitting in my childhood room playing those old video games.
Nostalgia.
Yeah, here we are again. Do not overdo it. Yeah.
Don't overdo it. Nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, I thanks for coming on, Tom. I think we're at a good point in the conversation to end the interview. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. Kyle.
Thank you so much. You've made a early dream
When
we started this show come true by coming on.
Thanks, guys. It was really relaxing to talk with you guys, and I appreciate it.
Until next time, this is Eric.
And this is Kyle.
All right. Thanks.